אולגה שבצ'נקו, תלמידת מוסמך למדעים פוליטיים בתוכנית לתרבויות יהודיות במכון ללימודי יהדות היידלברג בגרמניה. And Olga will speak in English, and she will speak about Uman and Pilgrims, contemporary issues and challenges. Please.
I will speak in English because excuse me? I will speak in English because my Hebrew is not as good as I would like it to be. And first of all, I would like to ask you a question. How many of you have been to Uman? Visited Uman for pilgrimage or just, you know? Okay. So maybe I will begin with a small introduction, telling about actually what kind of place Uman is and why is it so important for Hasidic sort. Here you can see this big red dot, which is which shows the geographical position of Uman. What I would like to underline is that it is located in the central agricultural, kind of mono-religious and mono-ethnic region of Ukraine. And the historical reasons why the city has become so important for Breslov Hasidim, for Rabbi Nachman. I will not go into details, but maybe just give a small historical sketch. So in 1768, a huge massacre, basically turmoil occurred in Rzeczpospolita, which is the territory of contemporary Poland and Ukraine. During this massacre, about 20,000 Polish Uniats, Catholics, but mostly Jews, were killed by Ukrainian Haidamaks, so-called basically Ukrainian kind of nationalistic troops. And this massacre, we don't know much about it because, as far as I know, there was a kina, a weeping for the victims of this massacre that was kept in Uman synagogue, and it was read every 5th of Tammuz, if I'm not mistaken, but this document perished during the fire in the beginning of the 20th century, so now we have only a photocopy that was preserved by chance. And also one of the historical witnesses of this event wrote a letter in Yiddish to Königsberg. In this letter he writes about 50,000-60,000 victims of this massacre. He basically tells that 50,000-60,000 Jews were killed and 20,000 successfully fled from Haidamaks, but those of them who converted to Christianity were forced to take part in pogroms against their kin, and those who tried to bribe the Haidamaks were killed anyway. So why am I talking about this now, and why is it so important? Basically for two reasons. Here you see the map of contemporary Uman city plan, and the place where the kever, the grave, kind of grave of Rabbi Nachman is located, and just a few streets away from it there is a street named after Maxim Zhelezniak, one of the leaders of the Haidamaks who conducted this mass killings, this massacre. So what am I trying to say is that basically the perception of some historical figures in contemporary Ukraine, among contemporary politicians, is quite positive and quite different from what maybe it should be. there are historical evidence that says that this massacre influenced very much Rabbi Nachman's last days of life, and I don't remember the name of the document that says that he has spent the last days of his life in the house that was facing the grave of the victims of these killings. Basically he saw a huge importance in, there is a beautiful Kabbalistic explanation about why is it so important to redeem the souls with the force of the tzaddik, and so on, but I will not go into the details. I'm sorry, I'm not a big specialist in this. Yeah, so I will switch to the main part of my research. Basically, what I am doing is I'm researching the influence of Hasidic pilgrimage on social, economic, cultural life of contemporary Uman and of contemporary Ukraine in general. Why is it basically after the independence of Ukraine, the number of pilgrimages to Uman has reached dramatic numbers, about 30,000 people who come to Uman during Rosh Hashanah. There are some people who buy property in the city and stay there or live there. Quite a big number. I'm not sure because I think there is no real statistics about this. Basically, in this very small town with only 87,000 of Ukrainian population, such a huge number of pilgrims influences basically every aspect of life. For example, only in 2012, let me see. Yeah, in 2012, the annual income, the overall sum that was spent by the pilgrims during autumn celebrations of Rosh Hashanah reached more than $7.5 million. But this money, which could have been spent on the improvement of municipal infrastructure, they became instead a part of shadow economy, and on that year in 2012, only as far as I know, 100,000 actually reached the town budget and were spent on municipal needs. Therefore, the income that Uman receives from the pilgrimage did not influence on the well-being of local citizens to any significant extent. For example, many districts of the town still lack canalization and water supply, like roads and communal buildings have not been repaired for years. And all these deficiencies in Uman infrastructure become especially visible when the population of the town grows by almost 1/3 during the holidays. So the sources of my research include three main parts. First of all, these are the interviews with inhabitants of Uman, I mean the Ukrainians. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do my research also with representatives of Jewish community, with Hasidim, unfortunately for obvious reasons. But I have been able to conduct 50 interviews with inhabitants of Uman. And what is interesting about these interviews, one of the most interesting things is that they, how to say, it's what interests me the most. It's not the facts, the stories, the factual part of their of what they have to say, but rather how they refer to the pilgrims and what kind of words, what kind of discourse they use in their speech. Excuse me. Mainly, what can I say? Pilgrims are described by local citizens most often as a source of income, and there is a stereotypical image of a rich Jew. For example, a quote, "How much do I charge them? Well, about $100 per person. Sometimes I get about $1,000 per week. That's not much. You know what the taxes in Ukraine are. Nobody forces them to pay. It's their choice." End of quote. Also, there is this constant relation to the pilgrims as dangerous and suspicious people. I must say that it's my respondents did not. Very few people described the Hasids, the Jews, as they did not mention their religious or ethnic identity. Basically, when they did mention it, it was either positive or neutral. For example, they referred to solidarity that Jews have, in their opinion, and Ukrainians don't have, and some other positive things. But when they were talking about something negative, it was not quite, I wouldn't call it anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish. My respondents were rather referring to some everyday conflicts, like references to property damage, fraud, improper behavior towards women, alcoholism, or fights. So it is important to note that in spite of negative charge of the image of a pilgrim, I must admit, all of my interviewees emphasized practical, routine, material basis of the conflicts with Hasids. The second main source of my research is the qualitative analysis of local and national mass media reports. Basically, how the local Ukrainian and national media describe the Hasidim. And here I must say that, well, let me show you. Yeah. There is basically every year some local politician or some political activists publicly accuse pilgrims of some ridiculous kind of thing like spreading of disease, for example, cholera, bubonic plague. Last year it was Ebola, as far as I remember. So they claim that basically pilgrims come from the countries that are endemic for these viruses. Yeah, I'm sorry to tell you this. Well, yeah, what is also, every year there is a kind of effort to confine the pilgrims to some kind of restricted area with restricted access. And for example, in 2014, a Ukrainian politician, the deputy of the ruling party, registered a bill according to which a permanent special territory of stay should be introduced for Hasidim in Uman. And the main argument for the creation of such a territory was ensuring of protection of rights and interests of pilgrims and population. And the cost of entrance permission into these quarters would have been around $100 a day for the sake of the comfortable stay of pilgrims in Uman, but the bill was fortunately declined as unconstitutional. And maybe one, how much time do I have? 5 minutes, thank you. Great, so one last thing maybe that I will mention is role of pilgrims in kind of mobilization efforts by not only by rightist parties, but basically by all the parties of all their all kind of movements. According to my data, 20 out of 43 individual and collective protest actions that took place in Uman during 5 years, from 2010 until 2015, used anti-Semitic agenda, speech, symbolics, etc. I can show you an example of this. This is, by the way, very illustrative because this division into Ukrainian and foreigners, references to Jewish occupation of Ukraine, took especially disturbing scope, especially disturbing forms during after the beginning of the armed conflict in Ukraine, in the eastern regions of Ukraine, when basically the activities of far rightist parties were legitimized to a large extent in public opinion, in public discourse. So now they can use this kind of rhetorics with even more, much more legitimate kind of space than ever. Basically, summing up, I can say that most of the conflicts that arise between the representatives of Hasidic and Uman Ukrainian communities in Uman as a result of infrastructural, economic, and legal deficiencies that complicate interaction and mutual understanding. So basically, instead of benefiting from pilgrimage, both local authorities and politicians and law enforcement, they either avoid intervention into relation between communities or increase barriers between them. And lack of knowledge about Jewish traditions, stereotypes, and anti-Semitic discourse that arise from everyday conflicts allow for distinction of Hasidim as a scary and unintelligible other. And this in turn enables rightist groups to use anti-Jewish rhetorics as a tool for mobilization of the public in order to achieve their own political goals. I will finish now, and maybe I will answer the questions later. So thank you very much for your attention.